What's the most disgusting thing you've ever done? I used to work for a company that transported bodies for the coroner's office and about 20 funeral homes in the area. I didn't really want the job, but it was not long after the economy collapsed, felons were not in high demand in the job market, and I had bills to pay. Also, I'd found my kid brother deer a year prior, which didn't do anything good for my psyche. I thought more exposure to death might somehow soften the blow, or desensitize me enough to wipe that memory from my brain. So, I receive a call at 7-something on a Friday morning. I'm to meet the medical examiner at the scene of a fire. When I arrive, I'm told the decedent is an 83-year-old man named Sidney, and it's his birthday. He planned to have the family over that afternoon to celebrate, but didn't like the look of the weeds growing between the brick pavers spanning the stretch from his home to his detached garage, so he decided to torch them. Sidney poured gasoline all over the weeds, unaware the gas can had a pinhole and he was spilling it all over his pants leg. He walks into the garage, sets the can down, lights a book of matches and tosses it out the door, and the flames come right back inside and up his leg. He knocks over the can, spilling gas all over the floor, which spread the flames to the garage walls and the Honda Accord. I go to put Sidney in the Ziploc. He's my first burn victim. And when I grab his arms, his skin crackles like a hot dog that's been on the grill too long. His skin came off in my hands, as degloving and slippage are common in serious burns. So it's probably 9:30ish by the time I load the birthday boy into the meat wagon. He smells awful. As soon as I close the rear door, Sean, the medical examiner, sticks his head around the van's rear and says, "Ready for the next one? She's only 2 miles from here. Neighbors reported a foul odor and say they haven't seen her in weeks." Oh joy. The lady lived in a townhouse condo. When I arrived, there were 6 or 7 uniformed cops standing on the lawn, all with disgusted looks on their faces. The front window of this condo has so many flies on it, it resembles a scene from the Amityville Horror. Covered, no exaggeration. I ask one of the cops how bad it is. He asks how much protective gear I had in the wagon. I start listing the items. He says, "Fuck it, man, wear 2 of everything, it's horrible in there." I'd be remiss if I did not mention that this is all occurring in August. Temps are in the mid-90s, and I have to wear a suit and tie for this gig. After putting Vicks under my nose, I don my biohazard suit, respirator, goggles, additional shoe covers, and 3 pairs of gloves. I see her legs protruding from behind the kitchen island. There's a zillion flies buzzing around as I approach. Sean is shaking his head in disbelief as he takes photos. I round the corner of the island and discover this woman has a cat, and it hasn't had any meow mix in at least 3 weeks. The cat was literally eating the flesh from her owner's face as I stood there. Sean tells me we're going to be there a while because we need to wait for a feline dentist to come there and extract the tissue from the cat's teeth. The odor caused by a human body 3+ weeks into active decomposition in August in a closed space is fucking horrible. Ghastly doesn't do it justice. I'm gagging and trying not to puke, and I haven't even touched this poor old woman yet. Her phalanges are exposed, she's leaking everywhere, and when I roll her over, she fell face down, the whole right side of her face had melted into the carpet, 0 distinguishable features. After 2 hours of this disgustingness, I load her into the wagon. Now I have a burn victim and one in active decomp 3 feet behind me, and it's hot out, man. The AC in the van does not work. I roll the windows down, but I don't want to smell any more of this than I have to, so I keep all my gear on. There's a magnet for the door, but it is not in the van for some reason. So each time I pull up to a stoplight, people catch a whiff of my cargo, look over and see me dressed like I'm about to cook meth or kidnap ET. I can only imagine what went through their heads. I kept the job until the day they sent me to pick up a 3-year-old girl who drowned. My daughter was only a few years older than the girl. It messed with my head, and that was the day I discovered that my line in the sand on a dirty job is dead kids. Apologies for the novella.
I'm a nurse at a retirement home for elderly people, so I have some. Trigger warning for pee, vomit, and poop. One time I had to help an elderly lady poop. We found her with the diaper in pieces on the bed, her fingers stuck in her butthole trying to pull the poop out. We cleaned her as throughout as we could and tried to reassure her, while she tried to caress us, thanking us for being her saviors. I stayed with her while my colleague went checking on another person, and I had to witness her pushing out one of the fattest turds I've ever seen, while pushing her underbelly to help her out. She then laughed in relief, and some brownish liquid exited her body, mostly a mixture of poop and mucus, spraying her bedsheet. Some other time, while working my usual weekly night shift, I accidentally dropped a bottle full of pee. Don't know how those are called in English. It's some kind of plastic bottle we leave in male patients' bedrooms so they can pee in bed, and I had to clean everything up while trying to be as silent as possible to not to wake everyone with my curses. Lastly, 2 days ago, shit, piss, or wounds won't disgust me as vomit. I hate how vomit smells. I hate the sounds somebody makes while vomiting, and usually I sprint as far as I can while someone is vomiting. Unfortunately for me, I had to help an old lady while she was vomiting during dinner. My other colleagues had to bring everyone else outside of the dining room, while that lady was vomiting everything she ate, until the day she was born. While I was there, absolutely stunned, white as a wall, praying to whatever God resides in heaven to give me strength and not join that lady on a gruesome vomiting party. I then had to clean her up and bring her to her room, help her change her shirt. Then I looked at colleagues and asked for a moment of peace. I still have that smell in my nose. It's been 2 days already, but God.
Worked at vet during the summers while in high school in the 90s. Dead Rottweiler brought in, suspected of having rabies. Boss said put it in the freezer, we'll ship it out Monday. Didn't do rabies testing on site. Came in Monday, boss told me to bring up Roddy to room 1 surgery and prep for shipping. I was new and had no idea what that meant. Brought the frozen dog up to room 1, put it on the table. In the room was a giant bolt cutter and a large hacksaw, the size you'd use for a pretty large tree. They were not surgical instruments by any stretch of the imagination. I asked one of the other kennel techs what he meant by prep for shipping. Tech laughed and said, "Oh, you're new, we have to ship them to get tested. It's cheaper to mail 10 pounds versus 100 pounds," and pointed to a box about the size a cake would come in. He said head goes in plastic sharps bag and then taped in box. Label up front, and walked out of the room. I just stared at the dog. Laying on the table. Frozen. Boss walked by and yelled, "Hurry up. Easier to cut when frozen." So I sawed the head off a Roddy and shipped it. Turned out to be a great job and worked there for 4 summers in a row and had many more interesting stories. Some good, some sad, some gross, some heartwarming, some that would seem like it was a TV sitcom. Doing CPR on what already looked like a day-old corpse. This woman was oozing, I don't even know what, out of the pores in her body and more, but we were only 10 minutes in, so we're gonna keep going. I noticed after my first rotation doing compressions that I had no gloves on. Squirming and inside screaming, I go wash up and then get gloves on, just to make it in time for my turn again. This lasts probably only 30 minutes BC TBH. We all knew she wouldn't make it, but damn did we try. After our efforts, the physician called it, and we went to go clean up what we could that we ultimately pushed out of this body from compressions, as well as her own oozage that kept coming out afterwards. Anyway, good CPR practice. Also, as a student nurse, I had to help a man use the bedside urinal, as he was too obese to reach the urinal, as well as find and hold his. So I'm standing there trying to be considerate and not look a lot at it, because yeah, that sucks for him, but lo and behold, I look away for a second while this man coughs and his peen shakes away from my hold and flaps around while he's urinating, getting all over not just himself in his bed, but me. Thankfully just the arms and torso down, but damn, was it smelly.
I was on holiday in France some years ago. Went out for dinner and had a lovely lobster linguine. Fast forward to the next day. I'm in the city on the tram when I start to feel really sick. The motion of the tram makes it unbearable. I urgently press the next stop and barely make it off, spewing into a bin in front of at least 50 people waiting for the tram. At this point, I can only assume the lobster must have been rancid. Just moments after this thought, my intestines start gurgling. So now I'm in a predicament. I feel too sick to get back on the tram to make it back to the hotel, but I'm at least 10 stops away, which is around a 30-minute walk. I had no idea where a public toilet might be, and I felt I needed to be in a safe place at the hotel, as this was a severe case of the sicks and shits. That was the longest 30 minutes of my life. Every time I stepped off a curb, I was convinced I couldn't hold on any longer. The pain was immense and the sickness was so bad I couldn't even think straight. I had broke out in a cold sweat and was trembling. So I finally make it back to the hotel. Mentally I'm thinking 30 more seconds and you can relax, you got this. You know that feeling of wanting to pee even more when you know the toilet is close by, exactly like that. I can now see my hotel room door. It's open and the cleaners are outside. I start panicking and praying they aren't in my room. I get to the room, there's 2 young ladies in there, who by the way don't speak a word of English. One is making the beds, the other is in the bathroom. I know the sick and shit is going all over me and the floor if I don't get to that toilet in 5 seconds. I shout move at her, practically shoving past her. She didn't even have time to make it fully out. I couldn't even think about closing the door. Projectile vomit and at least a liter of liquid shit comes out of me at exactly the same time. So I'm sat there covered in sick, sweating with shit splashed all up my ass and legs. All whilst this young lady is just stood near the door with her mouth ajar, in complete shock. I felt so relieved that I didn't even realize she was there, nor that I'd left the hotel room door open, so I was there for both the cleaners and anyone walking past to see. The cleaners left in a hurry without saying a word. I hung do not disturb for the remainder of my stay and dared look any staff in the eye. If I could hear the cleaners in the corridor, I'd wait for them to go so I wouldn't have to bump into them.
I dated a guy for years who lived in an old farmhouse that had lost its heat and plumbing capabilities. It was also chock full, hoarder style, of old family memorabilia. I remember him opening the chest freezer in the kitchen to show me a pike he had caught 15 years ago. The place still had electricity and a roof, so I suppose that's why he thought it was okay to inhabit it. We slept with a space heater in his room, which featured a twin bed, an analog TV, a few Maxim swim posters, and his old championship rodeo belt buckles. We passed outside the house. That meant, at night or in the cold, we would have to layer up just to open the bedroom door and make the trip to the side of the house. For anything else, including showers, we'd walk to his mom's house down the road to use her bathroom. I suffered so many UTIs while with this man. It was also absolutely haunted. I'm talking things going bump in the night, the dog refusing to go into the house sometimes, music playing from instruments that hadn't been touched in years, neighbors on that old rural road with similar stories. Creepy shit. I suspect the place was filled with mold and bugs too, but I could have cared less at the time. I was 19 years old dating the cool 30-year-old. Though I felt invincible at the time, I'm horrified looking back that I ever let a man befuddle me like that.
I was on maneuvers while stationed with the army in Korea. We had subsisted on only sea rations for a week, so the platoon sergeant decided to try and get a hot meal from one of the villagers in a small town nearby. The Korean interpreter with us negotiated a hot meal for the entire platoon in exchange for some of our sea rations. We were waiting around our jeeps for the ladies in the village to bring us some hot food, when a procession of people started bringing out tables and bowls of hot food. After sitting on the ground around the table put in front of my squad and I, we started hand-feeding ourselves from the different bowls of hot food. I wasn't paying close attention to what was going on around me and picked up what I thought was a bowl of soup. It was nice and hot, so I only took a few sips. After sipping what I thought was soup, I remarked to one of my squad members that the soup was kind of bland. It had very little taste. He looked at me and asked, "Are you sipping from the bowl in your hands?" I said yes. He started laughing and said, "No wonder it's bland, that's not soup, it's a finger bowl. We haven't been dipping our fingers in it to clean the food off them." I immediately lost my appetite. I had been starving, but having drank from a bowl that others used to clean their fingers greatly dampened my appetite. I then walked over to the medic to alert him I might need his services in the near future. Fortunately, other than suffering from the embarrassment of drinking from a finger bowl, I suffered no ill effects. The lesson I learned at that meal was to always check out what you want to eat or drink, before you put something in your mouth.